All right, let's talk about what it would take to reach the level of 1800. In my earlier videos, I started way down at 400. We're talking about the dimensions of material, mastering not giving away your stuff. Then we started to talk about time. And then really barely mentioned was the third dimension of the game, which is generally characterized as quality of position. Now, some people break down this quality of position into a gazillion different categories, like king safety, pawn structure, initiative, that kind of thing. I like to keep it simple. In terms of positional understanding, right around now is really when we need to develop that kind of positional intuition about that kind of that third dimension. And what we're going to see in the game that I review is that what's interesting is, in contrast to the earlier videos I did, those videos I didn't have too much debate with a lot of the things that people said. Whereas here, what the players are clearly going to be doing is expressing how they feel about the position in a more nuanced way. And then, I'm going to take issue with the way they say it. And that's part of the joy of what this level of chess now is, right? Because there's subtle things going on that will decide games from a positional standpoint. On the other side, there's also, of course, calculation. And calculation is not just like white to play and win like you sometimes get in puzzles, but it is going to be white or black to play, and then how do you evaluate the position at the end? Who's winning and why, or who's better and why? And so that's a lot of the art of this third dimension going forward. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just take a look at this rating graph. And as you can see, when I say 1800, I'm talking about FIDE, and then USCF is higher, of course. ChessCom and Lichess are above that. Now, this screenshot that I have is from a famous dojoer named ChessLatte. ChessLatte is 11. Maybe he's 12 by now. You can see in this graph that it's just a stunning rise that he's had. And the other thing, the main reason I wanted to show the graph, so look at this number here, 99.8. So there are some titled players who think like anybody can be a titled player, and because they thought it was easy themselves. But when you see that number, I think that's a sobering thing, 99.8. And I'm sure many of you have done other things besides chess, some kind of sporting activity. And you think about what it would mean to be in the 99.8 percentile of anything. Well, that's next level, man. When I imagine like people at the gym, 99.8, those are some hard dudes, and women. And so it's just a stunning number that I think we need to be aware of, because it really means that your competition at this level is also becoming aware of certain subtle things about the game and the chess culture that you need to now get a hold of to compete with them. Okay, so first thing I want to then do is then close this down and show this. This is our our scoreboard here for the 17 to 1800 group, and really beautiful. And a couple things I'm just going to point out. I'm really going to stress this rook endgame progression that I designed as a way, and I'm going to do a separate video about it, of really, I think if you were going to study anything, let's say you were going to ask me, I've got 3 hours, and what is the best way I can spend it in order for rating game? Rook endgames. And I've designed this thing as a competitive way to challenge yourself, where you have to beat somebody in your cohort at a set number of positions, right? Match 1, match 2, match 3. And I'm going to particularly stress it now, because I think that if you understand some of these positions and you study them, then what happens in ChessLatte's game that we're going to look at in a little bit, there'll be less chance that will happen. Okay, Life and Games of Tall, Winning Chess Middle Games. We're starting to read some really great books. You can see we're really sparring the openings. We'll talk a little bit more about openings when we go review the game as well. And then here we're doing Petrosian's games, 40 of Petrosian's games. Fantastic. Again, like I always say, I encourage people to do it in a group. You can, of course, do it alone. And if you do so, then I encourage you to do it on a wooden board. Okay, and then, of course, you see here the classical games and post-mortems. And you've got to do a lot of them. And as I said every time, the big pleasant surprise for me in working with this program is that the annotations that people have submitted are very good. Now notice in each switch I do, I get a little smaller here. I become a postage stamp. And this is ChessLatte's game against Falk. And Falk is also a member of the dojo. And there's several things about this game where I feel like I'm going to be very critical, maybe to both players, but I'm hoping that this will be productive. Now, something I want to stress is one of the beautiful things about the dojo is that you don't need a coach, right? It is telling you, it's giving you a structure where you don't need a coach. However, something we're developing now is some coaches. We have at least 4 who are in the program themselves. And we have some GMs, we have some lower rated players. You know, not everybody needs a GM. In any case, I'm just going to mention it because, especially around now, it's good to have, and I do this myself, I have my games looked at by somebody, to have a different eye to what you're saying and your evaluations, just to give you a human check of how you're approaching the game, like I'm going to do here. Okay, so let's get into it. And one of the things that's interesting about the way I listen to a lot of players at this level talk about openings is there's a lot of names like Anti-Kid, Anti-Grunfeld. A lot of times it sounds a little bit like gobbledygook when you step back from it for a second. Instead of trying to just say the dynamics of the position. For example, on h4, it's obviously a controversial move. Back when I was a kid, if you played this move, they would throw you out. They would toss you. And it might be playable in this barbaric sense of getting the rook in, but it really is a highfalutin act by white now, especially because the white king will permanently be harder to put into a safe spot himself. Okay, so bishop g7, knight c3, d6, e4, c5, and white takes. Okay, so one of the things that I want to stress is I think that both players would probably be playing better moves if they didn't know the opening. Now, anything about openings, in fact, just opening principles. And something I should say about ChessLatte that's both inspiring and intimidating is that he has studied a lot of Chessable. So a lot of opening variations that he's learned by memory. And maybe even I can imagine Falk playing a weird move like h4 with the intention of like, oh, I'm gonna get him out of his stuff. And both sides are kind of doing themselves a little disservice because what's interesting now is we're just playing chess. Now we're just playing chess, right? Especially after dc5. White needs to understand that he has to keep the center closed for the sake of his king and for the sake of space and play d5, take away the square from the knight. And this is a very rich position. And a variation maybe ChessLatte could give would be b5, kind of a Benko idea. And I don't know, very rich. I think I would rather be black, but that's a little bit my intuition. So something I think is important, just a minor critique, is put a question mark here, ChessLatte. That's not a good move, dc5. And you're absolutely right that queen a5 would be a good move here. And in fact, white's position is very unenviable after this, because once you take back, where is white's king going to go, right? This is a threat, and you got to do something about it, and then we're going to play queen c5, right? It's a very difficult situation. Now, here though, dc5, this transposes into a bad endgame for me. I disagree. I think your endgame is fine, and in particular, I don't know what h4 does, and we're going to talk about something that has to do with structure. And I'm going to delve into this a little bit just so that you get a sense of what I mean by the understanding of structural stuff going on in chess. So what I want you to see is what's interesting about this kind of position is that his pawns are doing double duty. Let's go ahead and trade the queens. His pawns are doing double duty on the d5 square, whereas you have the opportunity, if you need to control e6. So you can control both key center squares, and he can only control one, d5. So I think, let's say you knew this position. This is from, I did an endgame called the Endgame Repertoire for white. And what's fascinating about this position is I think black is already strategically winning. It's not winning, but he's strategically winning because white's knights are dominated. The king is going to be absolutely fine. Why did I show this? Because, well, a lot of times we get this structure, and again, double duty, control. A lot of King's Indians, you get this too, this kind of thing, especially in the exchange King's Indian. Okay, so let's use this to then think about what's happening in your position with bishop e3. The problem for you that we have to address is your king will have grief, has grief, because the knight can mess with us if we ever try to come to the natural square. Right? So really it's only this knight that's enemy number one. But let's say something obvious. You are ahead in development here. Yeah, you're ahead in development. You're doing fine. Castles. And I think your move b6 is fine, but I want to stress, look, knight g4, that's an interesting pawn sack for you. And I don't know, I think we're going to get something wild like this. And then I don't know what's going on. I certainly don't think you're worse here. But let's give your move a try. Bishop e2, I don't like it. I don't like it. I think f3 has to be played. And so let's look. Bishop e2, bishop b7, and now I think he's already in a little bit of trouble. You give f3 is what he should have done maybe. But here, knight h5, and it's very important to see that you have two threats. One, to get rid of the knight, which would free yourself from the drama of the knight coming in. And two, you really want to exchange pieces. Also, you need to unleash this bishop by playing knight h5. So I don't know what white does here. I think it's a hard life. And here you commit a chess crime by playing knight e8 after e5. Right? So already white's in trouble. I think he needed to play f3, and knight e8 is a crime. Okay, so this is what I mean. If you have a sense of like two things. One, that knight is killing you. Two, that we need to trade, well, then we play knight e4 for sure. For sure we play knight e4. And we are looking to do cool stuff like trade the knight. And we just have to calculate, I think, that this doesn't work. That's all you really need to see. Are you ahead in development? Yes, you're doing great. This pawn is weak. So remember what I said. Well, I don't know if you have to remember. You might not have seen the earlier video, but I said a problem that kind of needs to be addressed from 1,000 to 2,300 up is time. It could also be said as piece activity, because knight e8, we're giving ourselves some real drama here, some real drama. And right now, bishop f3 isn't the only way. I looked at it. f4 is a fascinating move. By the way, I need to. This game I was fascinated by. There's a lot of interesting things. And I don't want to spend too long on it because I could go on forever. But f4 is interesting as a pawn sack, saying, hey, buddy, you could give me some time by taking on G2, but I'm gonna, come after you because you owe me so much time with this guy coming in. And the body slam is that guy. We want to slam that thing down on a way where you have to take it and then really mobilize all my stuff. Okay, in any case, bishop f3, pop, pop. Thank you for the exchange. And now I think he should have taken on f7. And here's a variation where you say black, or it's unclear. Gotta be better for white. Gotta be better for white, especially after a move like that. He's just talking to you. He's talking to you, ChessLatte. He's got the juice on the D file. Okay, so f4, h6. And it's funny that you played h6, ChessLatte, and then didn't realize that he wanted what he was afraid of. And so I think it would have been nice to try to imagine what he was afraid of. I think it's rook f8. Now, do I know exactly how it's going to go down from here? No, but I know it's going to be messy, right? It's going to be messy. Maybe f5? And it's going to be hot, and this would be a variation for you to look at. And in fact, I think from here on out, I'm just going to point out some things, maybe disagreements I had, but also just things that would have been good for you to look at. And by the way, a lot of people in our Discord are asking me, Kraai, I want calculation exercises. That's a calculation exercise right there. All of these positions in everyone's game, the calculation is all there, and it will be situations where you don't know what the answer is. You don't know in a game either. And you have to reach some kind of assessment of what you feel is going on. Okay, now an interesting, important mistake from ChessLatte. He then says a6, b5, right here, a6, h5, b5. If I just sit here and do nothing, then my opponent is just going to steamroll me. So I had to try to make some counterplay. Okay, no. You need to solve your problems before you open up all the windows in the house, right? So the easiest way, I think, at least the first question is going to be, how about f6? And then I still think you're fine. I still think you're fine. And that's one of the reasons I felt he maybe should have sacrificed the pawn earlier on g2, because here you're just fighting. And maybe you didn't do this because you felt like you're going to get a weak pawn or something like that. But pawns aren't people. Pawns aren't people. This guy's a person. These guys are people. They want to get out. And when you do this a6 stuff, you are going to be weakening your queen side whilst your pieces are not in. I don't like h5 because I'm not sure exactly what it's doing. And here you can consider a variety of things. I want you to play some version of f6, maybe even take on h5 first. You can also think about playing g5 and then f6. Everything's weak. And now you're in a little bit of trouble. And maybe you're right that d6 is incorrect, but I want to stress, give me a variation. Tell me what you think the guy should do. Now, it gets a little messy here, and I want to focus on the final stage of this amazing game. We could talk at length about this stuff here, okay? But I want to focus on what goes down now. Knight e7, rook d1. And here, ChessLatte, this is an amazing assessment that I can't disagree with more. And that I really think that if we can get you to not think in this way, that your chess progress will be assured. Here's what you write. Here we get into an endgame, but there is no need to analyze further. What? What? We just started here, ChessLatte. We just started here. Now, I think that when I hear that, I can feel that you're not sensing the importance of the endgame. And there's some really interesting stuff happening in this position that it's very difficult actually to evaluate. So, as an example here, you took. Now, it's the most ambitious move, and white needs to now prove something because you just stole a pawn, and this pawn is potentially weak. So there's just one obvious question, and that's, can dude play this? And then you could say to me, Kraai, well, what about knight e5, winning the pawn? Well, isn't that a problem? Looks like a problem to me. Looks like we're toast. White's winning. So right away, knight g4, you need to have an answer to d7. And what's the threat? Well, bishop b6 is the threat. You don't have knight e5. You don't have king e7. So I don't know. Looks bad. Okay, so now let's go a couple moves. King e5, I want to stress, would be, let's call it the ideologically correct move because we want to bring the king closer. White, notice, is just fiddling. And one of the things I want to stress is, at this level, what I see, the worst kind of play is endgame play, because this level, it's almost like they don't sense at what might be important in the endgame. And so they fiddle. They go back and forth like this. And what do? You thank you very much. Let's bring my guy, let's bring the dude in. Now you're very close to, I think, winning. You got the better king. You got an extra pawn. Thank you very much. Okay. What do I want to stress here? I really do believe that if you make yourself suffer through the rook endgame progression and endgame study, that this position will seem more like a joy to you. And you'll realize, too, that, these people playing these games, they're just leaving points on the table because they don't know what to do. For example, white's not activating his king, and now your knight's beautiful. Now here you have a variety of moves. G4 looks very compelling. Some crazy stuff happens. It's almost like people don't care. No one understands. And now it's as if both players think it's just a draw now. I get that sense just because you're not thinking it's interesting. And was there a million different things in that series of moves we could have talked about? Yes. And here, we can definitely even think about king d5, king c4 with an active king. White's king is way gone. I want to stress, this is not simply drawn for Mr. White here. A great variation to actually work on would be king c6, intending this. Can white hold? Great analysis question. Beautiful analysis question. I'm not sure. I kind of doubt it. This king's way out. A5, giving up your pawn and also liberating the rook, because the rook was passive on b2, having to guard his pawn. And now it probably is completely a draw. So let me just tell you, let's tell it as a joke. At a certain level, every chess player hears, I need to learn the Philidor, I need to learn Lucena. And what I often hear, I heard it on Discord, I thought it was hilarious, is somebody was like, I've never had those positions. And what's funny is, I know they've had those positions, they just didn't know that they were those positions. And I also know that they didn't know how to think about reaching those positions. Because once you know it in the back of your head, that just about every endgame is going to be about, can I reach the Lucena or can I reach the Philidor? Well, you're going to start seeing it. And in fact, if you played king c6 here, it's gonna start looking like a Lucena or a Philidor really quick, because white has to start doing something really dramatic to prevent king to c4. Once king c4 happens, it's good night Lucy. We're in. So, a couple things. Obviously, I'm stressing there on it. Let's work backwards and just reviewing them. Rook endgames. Okay, it is time to learn rook endgames. In the dojo training program, we have these rook endgame progressions. It gets a little harder each time you go up because you have to beat somebody that's at a higher rating level. That will teach you not only the ability to do these things, but the confidence to be like, oh yeah, I could maybe do this. I could maybe do this myself, and it could be really interesting. Because then once you have that confidence, you're like, right, well, I know that my opponents are going to fiddle-piddle at this level, right? That's a universal. Then they'll move fast too because they think it's just a draw or they don't know what to do. And once you have that confidence, like, right, hundreds and hundreds of rating points. Okay, then you can see I nitpicked with a lot of the stuff in the annotations. It's clear that if you improve your annotations, more variations, thinking deeper about dynamics, it'll be a great help. Then when we go to the openings, far more important than all the chessable work is some understanding of structures. And how do you get it? By studying books, but also by going over your own games and by thinking about, writing about the positions that you get. And again, we can think of this position here, for example, as some very theoretical position, possible. But it's actually, especially when we analyze it, more interesting to think about it in terms of what's going on. White clearly is playing some highfalutin stuff and doesn't get it by playing DC, right? Almost lost. I'll move 6 by white. Okay, so that's it. And by the way, I'm really hopeful for ChessLatte. He's been with us for a while, and one of the cool things about him is if he reaches 1800, he will be able to join the US Chess School, which is a cool thing that we do with US Chess School and ChessDojo. And also I have dreams of him. He's a dual national, Japanese and American, so I'm hopeful that he can make the Japanese youth team. It's just kind of a dojo goal of mine that he does that. Just a really cool experience to play in world youth events. All right, till next time, bye-bye.